It's my tremendous pleasure to welcome you this evening, to the Morris J. Wosk Centre for Dialogue, which is, of course, a key part of Simon Fraser University's growing Vancouver campus, for this exciting celebration of the 2011 Jack P. Blaney Award for Dialogue. And I must say it's particularly fitting that this award is being celebrated here this evening at a facility that Jack Blaney was so instrumental in helping to create and to bring to Simon Fraser University. Before going further, I'd like to extend a special welcome to a number of special guests who are here this evening, and I know I'm going to miss out people who are special because we're all special. You're all special this evening, but let me just note a few people who are here. Of course, we have tonight's award recipient, Karen Armstrong, who will be formally introduced shortly. SFU Chancellor Emeritus and Honorary Degree recipient, Dr. Joe Siegel, is here this evening. The SFU Board of Governors Chair Emeritus, Michael Francis, and his wife Daphne are here this evening. And the person in whose honor this award is given, Dr. Jack Blaney, SFU's President Emeritus and Honorary Degree recipient, is also with us this evening. So a welcome to all of them. We also have with us some other honorary degree recipients of Simon Fraser University, Joy Coghill, Gordon Gibson, Chief Joseph Gosnell, Wendy McDonald, Rudy North, Bing Tom, Max Wyman. And of course, I should have put doctor in front of all of those names because they are all indeed honorary degree recipients of this university, and we honor them as such. Well, the Jack P. Blaney Award for Dialogue is presented to an individual who has demonstrated excellence in using dialogue to further the understanding of complex issues that are important to the public. In 2002, the first award was given to leading international environmentalist Maurice Strong. In 2005, we presented the award to Mary Robinson, the former President of Ireland and United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Liz Lerman, choreographer and founder of Liz Lerman Dance Exchange, received the award in 2009. Tonight, we are gathered to honor the 2012 award recipient, Karen Armstrong, for a lifetime of outstanding achievement in advancing understanding amongst world religions and for promoting compassion as a way of life. Ms. Armstrong has graciously agreed to join SFU in delivering not just one evening, but indeed 12 days of programming, making this occasion far more than a single awards ceremony. Now, as many of you, I hope, are aware, SFU has recently committed itself to a new strategic vision, and that vision is all about being an engaged university, a university that is defined by its dynamic integration of innovative education, cutting-edge research, and far-reaching community engagement. And this vision, I'm pleased to say, has very much informed the planning of Ms. Armstrong's 12-day visit. In fact, anticipation of this visit has been so great that a full 3 months prior to Ms. Armstrong's arrival, 61 book clubs registered for more than 600 members to read and discuss her most recent work, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. The Vancouver School Board has created special curriculum materials for students to learn about Karen Armstrong's Charter for Compassion, and SFU researchers have organized a full-day symposium to examine the question, how do we educate children to be more compassionate? Throughout these and many other events, SFU students and alumni will work as facilitators, note-takers, and volunteers, thereby fulfilling our vision's goal of community engagement as a means for extending and deepening students' learning and of more closely involving alumni with the university. In total, the events of the next 2 weeks will see 2,000 local participants spending an estimated 6,000 hours discussing the role of compassion within their communities. Now that's engagement. But Ms. Armstrong will not only be engaging local communities, she will also, in the spirit of our new tagline, be engaging the world. An international audience of 300,000 individuals are already reading on Twitter about our local book club successes. And during Ms. Armstrong's public lecture Thursday evening, SFU will webcast a major international announcement highlighting the worldwide progress of the Charter for Compassion. The webcast of this lecture is being promoted to the Charter's 100,000 stakeholder community, and it will become a permanent part of the record of this growing international movement. So engagement is very much in the wind for the next week and more as Ms. Armstrong is with us to talk about her compassion and her passion for compassion. And with that, I'm very pleased now to turn over the proceedings to Dr. Mark Winston, who is the Academic Director of the Centre for Dialogue. And I must say that Professor Winston has been very much the driving force behind the events of tonight and of the ensuing 12 days. He has overseen the organization and selection of tonight's Blaney Award, and he will introduce our guest of honor, as well as the local partners who have contributed to the success of this wonderful venture. So please join with me in welcoming Mark Winston. Mark?
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to begin by adding my personal appreciation to Jack Blaney, whose vision of dialogue and his great capacity to also get things done resulted in this beautiful building and a great diversity of outward-looking programming that's been a cornerstone of SFU's role as the most public of universities. Jack, this award in your name, I think, is a most appropriate way to recognize your contributions to public discourse, so thank you. The building here, of course, is beautiful, but the programming is what the Center for Dialogue does. And our programming activities are broad and diverse, including teaching SFU's undergraduate semester in dialogue program, a signature teaching program in the university, encouraging experiential learning and community engagement across the university, hosting a vibrant program of research and community engagement with our fellows and associates, and facilitating public dialogues and workshops on important civic issues. Karen Armstrong, who we honor today, is a rock star of compassion. And the SFU 12 Days of Compassion tour demonstrates the network of deep community relationships woven through the center. It's a great pleasure to acknowledge our advisory committee on the visit and our event partners who have been very deeply engaged at every stage. Hee-Soon Bai from SFU's Faculty of Education, Robert Daum, Iona Pacific Interreligious Center, Alistair Smith, the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, and Lynn Green, the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education, have been key partners on the advisory committee. And we have been partnering as well with the Vancouver Board of Trade, the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, the Ismaili Center, SFU Faculty of Education, the Vancouver School Board, Free the Children, the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education, and the Vancouver School of Theology through the Iona Pacific Center. Internationally, we're partnering with the Charter for Compassion and the International Institute for Compassionate Cities. CBC Studio One Book Club is another partner, and just gives you a sense of the community relationships that this visit has allowed us to foster, to build, and which will persist as a treasured legacy from Karen's visit. I'd also like to acknowledge the steering committee for the Center for Dialogue, which selected Karen as a Blaney Award winner and has overseen the broad concepts of the visit. I'll just tell you a very short story. Before we selected this year's Blaney Award winner, we had a little retreat with the steering committee where we were just half a day spent thinking about the center. And we did this thing at the end of the morning. We make a wordle. A wordle is everybody says a bunch of words or writes down a bunch of words that they think reflect what the question was, what would you like the Center for Dialogue to be? And then we put it into the computer, and the biggest word that comes up is the one that's most frequently used. I could think of a lot of words that I would have expected, but the word that came up was compassionate. And that led us to Karen. And just before the formal award, I also like to acknowledge Robin Prest, Brenda Tang, and Linda Bannister. They are the staff at the center whose skill, dedication, calmness, tact, and dedication will always remain for me as one of the highlights of my time at the Center for Dialogue. So if we could just give them a... And now, it is my great pleasure to ask Karen Armstrong to join me at the lectern. Ms. Armstrong is one of the world's most thought-provoking and original public thinkers on the role of religion in historical and contemporary life. She is an international authority on religious fundamentalism and monotheism, and a leading voice in promoting the core elements of religious traditions that encourage mutual justice and respect. Her poignant writing and captivating talks have sparked worldwide debate and respectful dialogue. Through best-selling books such as 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, The Case for God, and A History of God, she examines the deep differences and profound similarities among a richly diverse array of religious cultures and belief systems. In 2008, she was awarded the TED Prize in support of her call for a council of religious and spiritual leaders to draw up a charter for compassion. The resulting charter applies shared moral priorities to foster greater global understanding and has grown to a considerable international following. A network of compassionate cities is now emerging to endorse and implement the charter practically, realistically, and creatively. As a speaker and writer, she reminds us eloquently that all major religions embrace the core principle of the Golden Rule, which requires individuals to treat others as they themselves wish to be treated. Through the Jack P. Blaney Award for Dialogue, we celebrate her innovative contributions to tolerance, understanding, and compassion globally. Karen Armstrong, Simon Fraser University, and the Morris J. Wosk Centre for Dialogue are honored to present to you the 2012 Jack P. Blaney Award for Dialogue. And I'd now like to invite Ms. Armstrong to deliver her Blaney Award lecture.
President, Mr. Blaney, Mark, thank you for this very great honour. I find it extremely moving to be with you here. Vancouver's a city I've always loved and enjoyed, and it's wonderful to be spending this time with you. And I'm, as I say, I'm more honoured and moved than I can say. Thank you. Well, you heard that in 2008 I won the TED Prize, and they give you a wish for a better world, which they try to make happen. And I knew almost immediately what it was that I wanted, because it had long been a source of frustration to me that religion, which should be making a major contribution to one of the chief tasks of our time, which is surely to build a global community where people of all persuasions and ideologies and ethnicities can live together in peace and harmony, is often seen as part of the problem. Every single one of the major world religions has developed an ethic of compassion and has asserted that it lies at the heart of the religious and moral and ethical spiritual life. Every single one of them has developed its own version of the Golden Rule. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself, and has said that that is the test of true spirituality. And yet, so often, we don't hear about it. All too often, when religious leaders get together, we hear about doctrines or a certain sexual orientation that needs correcting, or discussing whether women can be priests or rabbis or imams. Now, I'm not saying that these are not important issues, but what the world needs now is a disciplined approach to compassion, because I'm convinced that unless now we learn to treat all peoples, whoever they are, as we would wish to be treated ourselves, we will not have a viable world to hand on to the next generation. So compassion is no longer, it never was, just a nice thing to do. It is an urgent necessity. And so I asked Ted to help me to create and craft and propagate this Charter for Compassion. It was written by leading activists and thinkers representing 6 of the major world faiths. It was a symbolic, it was a sign, a manifestation that despite our differences, and despite the fact that religions are seen to be continuously and chronically at loggerheads, on this we were all in agreement, and that we could reach across the divide and work together to create a better and more just world, a more respectful world. And the Charter was launched in 2009, and much to my amazement, the people who've come forward to help me most have been businessmen. I could not have expected this. It could not have been in my original plan at all, because I often say I have the business head of a chicken. But this has been wonderful because businessmen know how to think and plan strategically, to check, balance. They're very practical, and they have looked into the abyss in 2008 and saw what untrammeled greed could do to business. And so in Seattle, we have a group who've created the Compassionate Cities campaign. And that's not meaning that the city is compassionate, but that it's put compassion on its agenda. The mayor will affirm the Charter, and each year the community dedicates themselves to a task. In Seattle, the first of these cities, it was environmental issue, and then the next year it was a business issue in the community. The idea being to raise compassion from the lumber room, where it's so often relegated in our minds, to the forefront of consciousness. And there are now something like 70 cities worldwide going through this process, trying to integrate compassion into the nitty and gritty realities of 21st century life. One of the leaders of the Charter is Pakistan, where a young businessman who has invited me over many times launched the Charter with me in February 2011. And they are concentrating on education. They're working very, very closely with another young businessman and his team in Jordan on the other side of the Gulf. On the same kind of programs. During Ramadan, together, they put up a competition on the web whereby you post it up, one compassionate act a day during Ramadan. Again, the idea is to raise consciousness of compassion and make it one part of the forefront of our minds. We didn't expect many people to take it up. The first year, with maybe 10,000, we thought, but 40,000 people did it. And there were prizes for the most imaginative acts, but these were compassionate prizes, not just an iPad or a mobile phone. It would be something like a cataract operation for somebody who needed it. And it is wonderful to me that the Pakistan, which is right on the front line of so many of the conflicts that are dividing our world, should be such a pioneer in this respect. But there's still plenty to do, much to do. But what is compassion? Because on my travels, sort of promoting the Charter, I found that people were very confused about it. The word has become so devalued in our society that a lot of people simply think it means feeling sorry for people. When I gave a lecture in Holland a couple of years ago, I specifically said compassion does not mean feeling sorry for people. But every time I said compassion, in the word compassion, in the Dutch translation of my text in the newspaper, it was translated pity. The idea is ingrained. Compassion, the word compassion comes from a Greek and Latin root, meaning to endure something with another person. It means to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It requires you, as the Golden Rule says, to look into your own heart, discover what gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. In the Hebrew and Arabic traditions, the word for compassion is related etymologically to the word for womb. And that raises the image of mother love. The icon of a mother and child is what one of the defining universal symbols of our humanity, us at our best. But mother love is hard. A mother has to get up every night to her crying child, whatever she feels like. She has to put her own needs and wants on the back burner, put aside her own fatigue and impatience and boredom. She has to be watching that child every moment of the day, responsible for him or her every second. And then that cute little baby grows up and can become an enormous disappointment. But the mother doesn't give up. The mother continues to believe in the child, support the child in any way she can, despite her own grief and disappointment, and maybe even dislike at times. And there's a Buddhist prayer that is actually attributed to the Buddha. One of its lines is, "Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child." We are all called to have that same kind of responsibility for every single one of our fellow human beings, no matter how disillusioning or disappointing that experience may be. And this is what we need to save our world. The first person, as far as I know, to develop the Golden Rule was Confucius, some 500 years before the Common Era. And his disciples asked him, "Master, which of your teachings can we put into practice all day and every day? And what is the single thread that runs through all your teaching and pulls it all together?" Confucius said, "Shu, likening to oneself." Not putting yourself in a separate, special category, but looking into your own heart, as I said, seeing what gives you pain, and then refusing to inflict it on anybody else. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself, said Confucius. And notice he says it all day and every day. In England, we have a habit of saying when we've done something nice for somebody, "Well, that's my good deed for the day," as though we could then return for the next 23 hours to our usual greed and unkindness and selfishness. But no, all day and every day. And if you do that, you leave the ego behind, because you are constantly, in a disciplined way, putting yourself in the position of another person. Hillel, the great Pharisee, the older contemporary of Jesus, was once told by a Gentile who came to speak to him that the Gentile would convert to Judaism on condition that Hillel would recite the whole of the Torah while he stood on one leg. And Hillel stood on one leg and said, "That which is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man." That is the Torah. And everything else is only commentary. Go and study it. And it's a very deliberately audacious statement. All the things that we associate with Judaism, with our belief systems, the creation of the world, the oneness of God, the exodus from Egypt, this is all a commentary on the Golden Rule. Go and study it. And not one of you can be a believer, said the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, unless he desires for his neighbor what he desires for himself. And that is our task. But now people sometimes say to me, well, you're just preaching to the converted. On the day of the launch, I went into the BBC outlet. Britain, I must say, being the one country that has shown no interest in the Charter at all. I sometimes feel like a prophet without honour in her own country. And the interviewer looked at me and said, well, this is a fairly lunatic idea, isn't it? Now, but he said, who wouldn't believe in this? Who wouldn't agree with your charter? Who wouldn't agree? I said, I'm perfectly happy. I don't mind preaching to the converted. If everybody who say they believe in the golden rule and compassion stopped just believing in it and got active, we could change our world around. So and I sometimes think that if everybody who say they believe in the golden rule would give me $1, I wouldn't have to go down to Seattle next week to do some fundraising for the Charter. We could set it up for life. We all need to get active because we cannot, in justice or with reason, expect our leaders or our so-called enemies to behave in a more tolerant, peaceful, and rational way if we ourselves give free rein to unexamined prejudice. But this is difficult. I sometimes, when I look around at an occasion like this, but not here, of course, see mutinous expressions passing people's faces. You know, what does that mean? That I can never again sound off about my ex-husband or my unpleasant boss or this country with whom we're at war. And it is difficult. I called my book 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, with realizing, obviously, that its link with Alcoholics Anonymous, because we are addicted to our pet hates. We don't know what we'd do without them. We often define ourselves against the people we dislike. And when we sort of speak about them with anger and self-righteousness, we often get a sort of buzz, like the buzz you get with the first drink of the evening. But this is dangerous to us. And we have to wean ourselves away from these habits, step by step, just as if we would have to do with a noxious substance. And so I'm not going to go through all 12 steps tonight. You'll be pleased to hear. They start very simply with learning about compassion in your own tradition, be it religious or secular, finding out more about the way compassion is addressed in other religious traditions. And it finishes with love your enemies, the hardest one of all. But I'm going to concentrate on two of these because I'm standing in this Centre for Dialogue. And the step 7 is how little we know. We're living in the age of information. We just at the click of a mouse, we can bring up a whole range of facts and figures, and we hear a lot of news, we listen to news programs, and we think we know a lot. And we are encouraged, quite rightly, in our free countries to express our views forcibly. And our airways are absolutely clogged with phone-ins, chat shows. I'm on them myself, they've arranged them for me here. And sometimes, people call in, and if you happen to know a little bit about the subject under discussion, it's quite clear that the amount of solid information that is being exchanged, often very vociferously indeed, could be comfortably contained on the back of a small postcard. And so people sound off about this and that. And how we speak about one another in such an omniscient way, too. Oh, well, the trouble with her is. As though you could simply take breath and sum up the entire complex mystery that each human being presents in a single sentence. And we don't just do it with individuals. We do it also with whole cultures, whole peoples, whole religions. Oh, well, the trouble with Islam is. And again, it's quite obvious that people have taken up an opinion they read in an op-ed article a couple of years ago, or another one that they heard on one of these talk shows or on a television interview, and make up an opinion with which they hold hard. Now, with a topic like Islam, this is a hugely complex faith tradition with many, many different strands, and has been adhered to by billions of Muslims over centuries in very, very different climes and periods of history. How can you sum it up in a single omniscient sentence? And one of the things, it's the same with Christianity. How would you sum up Christianity? Just think, run your mind through the various denominations and their different biases. So to begin with, when we are facing our world, we must understand really how little we know. And this lies not just in religion, but at the heart of the Western rational tradition. When people came to Socrates to have a dialogue with him, they usually thought they knew what they were talking about. But after half an hour of Socrates' relentless questioning, they found that they really didn't know the first thing about courage or goodness or justice, basic facts, basic things in human life. And very often a Socratic dialogue, as recounted by Plato, will finish with all the participants, including Socrates himself, scratching their heads and saying, "We don't know anything." However stringently they argue, something always eludes them. And in one, the participants who've been discussing courage, even though all three of them, Socrates included, were veterans of the Peloponnesian War, had all known about the terror of the battlefield, they found they could not define what courage was. They did not know what it was. And they say, we are like children at the end. We have to go back to school and begin again. And at that moment, Socrates said, you become a philosopher. Somebody who is a lover of wisdom. That's what the name philosopher means, because you know you don't have it, and you pursue it as ardently as a lover. On the last day of his life, Plato says, Socrates said, I am wise only in one respect, that I know nothing at all. And this is very important for us to consider, because we know so much, and we think, and our heads are so cluttered with facts and figures. But there's always something that eludes us. Unknowing is something we're slightly embarrassed about. If you ask somebody a question and they say, I don't know, they'll say, I'll look it up. No question, I'll find out tomorrow. And of course we should. We must always keep on finding out about things, but how little we know. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was confidently predicted there were just one or two outstanding problems left in the Newtonian system, and then our knowledge of the cosmos would be complete. And 20 years later, Einstein comes along, and we are faced with an utterly mysterious, indeterminate universe. And Einstein himself said to be in the presence of what is impenetrable to us, and what we cannot comprehend, is the source of the greatest joy. It's not a source of frustration, it is a source of immense joy. And he who has not experienced this, said Einstein, is as good as dead. Karl Popper used to say, we don't know anything. And he said that this was it had been a source of great contentment to him during his career to be constantly pondering imponderable questions. And every single human being is a mystery. I don't know about you, but I'm continually surprised at myself. And people pay good money to go to psychiatrists to help them understand themselves and their complexities and their fears and hopes. And And yet, here we go, sort of pontificating about other people. There's a passage in Hamlet that has always meant a great deal to me. Hamlet, you may remember, I'm sure you know the story, but just in case it's a bit rusty, is causing a great deal of problems in the court of Denmark. And so the king sets two of his friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, to spy on him. And it doesn't take Hamlet long to realize what's going on. And so one night he goes to Guildenstern with a recorder, a pipe, and he says, I pray you, play upon this pipe. My lord, I cannot, says Guildenstern. Why not, says Hamlet, it's as easy as lying. And then he says, and here I paraphrase, obviously, he said, it's nothing to it, you just blow down this tube, wiggle your fingers around, and out comes the music. My lord, I have not the skill, says Guildenstern. Why look you now, says Hamlet. What a poor thing you would make of me. You would play upon me like this pipe. You would pull out all my stops. You would play me to the top of my bent. You would pluck out the heart of my mystery. Every time we are in contact with another person, we are in the presence of a mystery. That's why the Hindus, when they greet one another, will bow with their hands joined to acknowledge that mystery that they are encountering in the other. And that leads us to step 8. How should we speak to one another? Because dialogue is one of the buzzwords of our time, and people often think that if only we could all engage in dialogue, peace would break out. But there's not much Socratic dialogue going on. This is what's so marvelous about this hall. Everybody is, there's no one, I know I'm haranguing you from this podium, unfortunately, but there's no one at the head of the table. Very often when we go into dialogue, so-called, we're engaging in dialogue with these people. In other words, we want to bludgeon them round to accepting our point of view, or to come round to our way of thinking. If we engage in religious dialogue, we're sort of pointing out that our faith is really the best at the same time. But no one could ever win a Socratic dialogue, because the Socratic dialogue always ended with everybody realizing that they knew nothing at all. There is no point in entering into dialogue if you're not prepared to be changed by the encounter. At every point, Socrates said, the participants must be in accord. Nobody must be pushed where he doesn't want to go, where he's not comfortable with. No bullying. Each participant must give his opinion, expressed beautifully, and the others will listen and let it enter themselves and unsettle their own opinion. And at every point, Socrates said, there must be gentleness. Gentleness and consideration and if it is conducted with malice, then it is not true dialogue. There's so much of our debate in our media, in our politics, in academia even, in religion, is aggressive. It's not enough for us to seek the truth. We also have to defeat and somehow humiliate our opponents. Now, it's always important to speak out. Sometimes when we see injustice and cruelty and selfishness and greed and corruption, we must speak out. But we must try and do it in a way that doesn't cause more hatred. More, as Socrates, as Gandhi said, ask yourself when you're about to speak out against something or to protest, ask yourself if you're speaking to ameliorate, to make things better, or if you are seeking to punish or to injure. And I like to use St. Paul's hymn to charity as a sort of checklist, because I have a very sharp tongue. I learnt it at the University of Oxford, where everything was very edgy, and you learnt that attack was the best form of defence, and to be very clever and witty in the way, and unkind in the way we British often are. So charity, says St. Paul, is patient. It is kind. And this is what I like. It is not puffed up. So often when you see people inveighing against something on the television, spluttering with indignation, you can almost see them swelling before their eyes, your eyes, with self-delighted congratulation, a sort of sense of righteousness. Charity, says St. Paul, takes no delight in the wrongdoing of others. Sometimes you see people positively smacking their lips with delight over the wrongdoings of others. This is disgraceful. Their eyes are alight with gleaming, because it makes us feel good to inveigh against other people. And this does no good at all. Every fundamentalist movement, for example, that I've studied in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is rooted in profound fear. And when they're attacked in any way, either in a media campaign or in a military assault, they almost invariably become more extreme. It is counterproductive to speak. And also, the dialogue makes us listen. We are very, very good at talking in our culture. We're not so good at listening. And sometimes when you see debates on television, for example, you can see that the participants, when one of them is speaking, are not really listening wholeheartedly to what is going on. But they're thinking of the next brilliant remark that they are going to make, or to think how to twist those words to give the coup de grace. Listening. We must start listening in our world. We've got to start listening to the pain that is ubiquitous in our world. And sometimes when antagonists on the different sides of a quarrel, of a conflict, say, speak out about their experiences, the other side will say, actually, no, that didn't happen then. You'll find it's a different date and something else happened. This is not the point. Because as every psychologist knows, a narrative is expressing an inner reality, often more than sheer facts. Let us listen to that pain. Let us let it break our hearts, but listen with open ears. And sometimes in the language of extremism, must listen to the fear and anger and humiliation that has led to this. Listen to the undercurrents. Learn to listen and decipher discourse as we would decipher a poem, to listen to the underlying spirit within. This is what is true dialogue. And I'm going to finish with a quotation that I found very early in my studies, and which I lighted on with enormous joy. It was very different from the rather argumentative Christianity, Catholicism of my youth, where we didn't even think Protestants were on the scale of salvation, let alone anybody else. But I found this. It's by Ibn Arabi, a great Muslim Sufi philosopher and mystic of the 12th and 13th centuries. Ibn Arabi said that every single one of us was an incarnation of one of God's hidden names, and that every single one of us was therefore a unique and unrepeatable revelation of the divine to the world. And if our job is to look beneath the sometimes unpromising exterior to see that divine name hidden within. And Ibn Arabi said, this hidden name that has been spoken in you and you alone will be deeply affected by the religious tradition into which you were born, whether it's Jewish or Hindu or Muslim. It's quite, in his poetry, like many Sufi mystics, he says that he's at home equally in a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, or a church, because once he's glimpsed the divine, the sacred, the transcendent, the mystery, these man-made distinctions don't seem so important anymore. And here he's talking about faith, religious conviction, but it can apply to many other kind of convictions too, that we have, that we cherish, that we hang on to with our life and feel deeply threatened if they are called into question. Do not praise your own faith so exclusively that you disbelieve all the rest. If you do this, you will miss much good. Nay, you'll fail to realize the real truth of the matter. God, the omnipresent and omniscient, cannot be confined to any one creed. For he says in the Quran, wheresoever ye turn, there is the face of Allah. Everybody praises what he knows. His God is his own creature, and in praising it, he praises himself, which he would not do if he were just, but his dislike is based on ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen, for a wonderful talk. So appropriate to hear your words in this beautiful room and think about dialogue and compassion as linked.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes where we can actually have a bit of a dialogue. And I think you all have instructions on the microphones. There are quite a few of you and 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is ask that you share whatever comments or thoughts you may have, but please don't take more than a minute to do so. And you're welcome to comment without a question. You're welcome to ask a question, whatever you would prefer. And I'll open it to you. Who would like to start?
Thank you very much for the talk. And it occurred to me that in the traditions I know, the arising of compassion is kind of the fruition of a path that very often starts with learning to forgive yourself. So perhaps that's part of the early steps. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Compassion for yourself is step 3. It's very important. That doesn't mean that we have to excuse and forgive everything that we have, but we are all flawed beings. Even Gandhi, even Martin Luther King were flawed human beings. So we mustn't think compassion isn't for us, but that we must visit that shadow side of ourselves, because we all have flaws and rages and angers that we don't like other people to see. We have weird fantasies of hatred, of sexuality. We have to visit that, because only if we visit that shadow side can we avoid being self-righteous about other people, that in another set of circumstances perhaps. But everybody has this. We're not alone. And if you are overly hard on yourself, you're likely to be overly hard on other people too. If you deny your own pain about these things, very easy to dismiss the pain of other people.
Thank you so much for being here. It's just such a delight and an honor to be among such wonderful friends and colleagues and mentors and indeed kindred spirits. I was driving this morning, and on the radio, quite by accident, I heard an interview taking place with the investigative reporter Charles Duhigg from the New York Times, and he was talking about his latest book, the release of Power and Habit. And as I was thinking about it and thinking about coming here this evening, I was wondering to what degree compassion could be considered habit or instinctual or choice. And then the next question I had to that was, if it could become a habit, what would that look like?
Other comments? Yes. Yes.
You made a most persuasive case as to why compassion would make a better world, a win-win world. We would all be better off. What do you think are some of the reasons we do not, in fact, behave that way?
Ego, selfishness. We are very complex human creatures. We have 3 different kinds of brains. And I write about this in my book and won't go into it now, but we've got a reptilian brain at the base of our brain, which is all about me first. And it has 4 drives about self-protection, self-aggrandizement, fighting and fleeing, for example, are part of it. And these are instinctual. If a tiger suddenly leapt in here, we would be supposed, for our survival, to rush out and leave our high-minded conversation. And these are very, very strong, these drives. And they're supposed to be. We wouldn't have survived without them. But we've also developed other brain centers that help us, that helped us mammals to identify with our young and to care for another creature, to have altruism. They're not as strong as these reptilian drives, but they're there. And then we also have this capacity to think and stand back and reflect, we human beings, the neocortex. We're not enthralled to these drives. But sometimes what happens is that the neocortex links up with these instinctual drives, and then you get Auschwitz and Hiroshima and 9/11. And when we feel threatened, when we feel our resources, because one of these drives is feeding. When we have to rush out and get resources. These brain things evolved in an environment of scarcity. And so we have to grab whenever we can, and we see this in our world too. If another country, for example, threatens our resources, our oil, out it all comes. So this is strong within us. And of course we have to look out for ourselves, but if we're only for ourselves, as Hillel said, if I'm only for myself, what am I? And we can be more than that, but it's a struggle.
Karen, welcome to Vancouver once again. I was very pleased to hear that you started off your conversation with Pakistan, that your words really resonated within a country in the subcontinent. And the fact that all these people that were affected by you were very focused on one thing, education. I strongly believe that compassion is something that should be linked to action. And the surest, one of the surest way to produce compassion that lasts a long time, a lifetime, is through the education of the young in a very early age, and education in the sense that goes beyond literacy and numeracy, but something that encompasses our innate humanity as well. So at the same time you were here in Vancouver in 2009, we have a friend who came also from the Indian subcontinent. And he runs one of the world's largest non-governmental organizations. They have 33,000 schools in the country. And they came to Vancouver and they took home the idea that education is something that should be more all-encompassing. And they went back to the country and they started to introduce this element of education among the poorest of the poor, among the disadvantaged. And they also disseminate this idea of a more holistic, whole person type of education to about 130,000 people who are employed in this organization. So it seems to me this is really compassion in action. And the other point is that we tend to think that we, the privileged people in the West, because we are well-to-do, we have the luxury of talking about compassion. But I think it's equally important in the third world, in developing countries as well, that this be kept within their education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing. I'm going to ask the question as an academic researcher. You're trying to make a difference. You're trying an intervention, a big, huge intervention. And my question would be, what would you look for to satisfy yourself that this is really making a difference?
First of all, not to look for quick results. In Pakistan, we've been saying it's taken 35 years for the country to get to this state. Before 10 years, we can't expect to see anything. Now, one of the great things about these business people that I'm working with now and learning so much from is that they have constant checks and balances and practical sort of ways of assessing things. But they, too, are saying not for another 10 years. This has to go deep, not something that's just flashy. But something that is deep and well thought out. And we're running pilot schemes at the moment and trying to learn from our mistakes. In Pakistan, for example, creating a network of compassionate schools, but saying, well, we've got to learn from our mistakes before we open it out to large numbers of schools. But it's never going to finish. We are never going to, I don't think, say now, well, we've done it, we've created a compassionate world. This is your question. Because we are these divided beings. And state structures are themselves not very conducive always to compassion for other state structures. These are insuperable difficulties. So what we can only do, I suppose, if, for example, just as the civil rights activists and the feminists changed in the 1960s the way we speak about gender and race, and they did change it. I remember the discourse of my childhood, and things were said that could not be allowed now. That is a kind of marker, but it will never be complete because we are always struggling. Each one of us, it's a journey without that we never finish.
I think we have time for maybe one more comment or question. Yes.
Thanks, Karen. I'm wondering how we can move the ideas of compassion, because I really agree, and we can do a lot on a interpersonal sort of level. But how do we move it to an institutional level? So as we move, say, from the age of enlightenment to the age of reason, we separated reason and emotion. And most of our social institutions grew up in the age of reason. So in our justice system, for example, we're asked to leave emotions at the door, and we go on fact-finding missions and stuff. And it seems to me, through our institutions of not only justice, but even education, we legitimize punishment and retribution every day. And that sends strong messages to, civil society, so to speak, or society in general. So how do we raise the bar to the institutional level?
Well, I wish I knew. First of all, though, I think the fact that business is involved in this, people are more likely to listen to business people, these are top business people, than they are to me, because our society is run according to the market. But let's separate. Compassion isn't just about the emotions. Compassion is, it's not just a question of feeling, because feelings come and go. They depend on the state of your digestion or how well you slept last night. Feeling isn't it. They're ephemeral. What we need is a principled determination to understand that our world is now so interconnected that we cannot live without each other, and therefore we have to learn, for our own self-preservation, how to relate to the other in a compassionate and respectful way. We are interconnected economically, electronically, and politically. When one market goes down, stocks plummet, as they have today all around the world. We are absolutely interconnected, and somehow our perceptions have to catch up with that reality, the reality that we've created. I think it will be that. But all through history, these individuals, the people I've mentioned, like Confucius, the Buddha, Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the prophets, they all were all dealing with societies like our own, where there was cruelty and injustice and misery, and speaking out in the name of compassion and against violence in all these societies where the Golden Rule developed. Violence had reached an unprecedented crescendo, and very often it is these outward disasters that makes people say something is broken. And I think people are aware that something is broken. All these protest marches against the cities, against bankers, against various things that you have in Washington, in London. There's a sense that there's not so much that we thought we've got sewn up, like our economic system has proved to have feet of clay. This is a moment for growth, therefore. But it's not something you can just snap your fingers at. There needs to be people like Confucius, spiritual geniuses, to come forward and point out the way. There'll always be people who'll pull back, but you just have to keep pushing on. But these moments of disaster and sorrow and tragedy and the sense of things not working right, this is a moment for growth, and it has been in the past.
Okay. I'm afraid we're out of time for our formal dialogue, but as we end in a moment, we have a wonderful reception out in the main atrium where you can hopefully continue the conversation. I'd like to conclude with two final thank yous, well, three really. One to many volunteers who have helped out today, particularly students from the semester in dialogue who have helped at the door and helped a lot in the logistics of the day. I would like to thank all of you for coming. It's, I think, a real tribute to the university's deep involvement in community, that there are so many of you here from so many different aspects of community. I know many of you, not all of you, and it's quite gratifying to see just how wide and broad the participants have been for tonight's dialogue. And finally, I would like to thank Karen, who has, in the last couple of days and in the days to come, has helped us to achieve what we had hoped, which was to bring conversation about compassion to Vancouver and the region for the next 12 days. Your thoughts on compassion and your practicality about how to reach it and your realism about compassion and its limits has been just marvelous. And I know I'm personally very deeply looking forward to the rest of your visit. We do have a reception, and please join us and enjoy the rest of the evening. Good night.